This is the Meetinghouse with Dwight A. Moody. News, reviews, commentary, and conversation on religion and American life. Now, here is Dr. Moody.
Hello, everybody, and welcome this afternoon to the Meetinghouse. I am Dwight Moody, coming to you from our studios in Hendersonville, North Carolina. It's a cool, clear day in the mountains here, and from here I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas wherever you are. I want to wish you a safe Christmas. I want to wish you a vaccinated Christmas, a socially distanced Christmas, but through it all, a joyful Christmas that you can spend with people who you love and who love you. We're coming to you today, as always, over the radio out of Brunswick, Georgia, the Golden Isles of Georgia, and also through the broadcast ministry of St. Stephen's Baptist Church of Louisville, Kentucky. You may be watching on YouTube. You may be listening on the radio. You may be watching on my Facebook page. I hope you are. If you are, I hope you will note it in the comments section. Let me know you're watching or listening. Say hello to me from wherever you are. And whenever you're listening, of course, on Facebook, these things are archived. And you may be listening live at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, December 23rd, or you may be listening 2 months later, or even later this evening. But let us know you're watching and listening. Send me a greeting. Tell me Merry Christmas. We've got all the news today brought to you by our sponsors, Perfecto Coffee. I sent a bag of it to all of my guests in the Meetinghouse, and I've sent it all over the country. I've got several people who are waiting for their bags of coffee, including Kenyatta Gilbert, who was my guest last week. This is what I'm sending him today. And then my guest next week, Mark Wingfield, the journalist, the religious journalist from the Dallas, Texas area. He joined me last year, as we did a year in review, and he's going to be joining me next Thursday after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, and we're going to be talking about the top religion stories of the year, as he's written about it all year and as we have reported about it here in the Meetinghouse. But as always, I start with the news. I've got 5 news stories brought to you by Perfecto Coffee Inc. We hope that you will order your coffee at perfectocoffeeinc.com. We're going to start out west in Salt Lake City, the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have a picture of it. A very wealthy Mormon businessman. In fact, they say he is the wealthiest native-born Mormon, a member of the church, has announced his formal and final withdrawal from membership of the church. He actually quit participating more than a decade ago. His name is Jeff Green. He wrote a 900-word letter to the current president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormons. He withdrew his membership. He castigated the church for hiding its history and finances and for hindering the global movements toward civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights. Of course, this attitude, as you know, is very common among Christians as well, who have castigated our own churches for resisting civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights. Mr. Green is the CEO and president of an advertising tech company called The Trade Desk. He is worth an estimated $4.9 billion. That's with a B. He has pledged to give away 90% of his wealth, and of course was taught to be generous in being raised in the Mormon church. And he accompanied his letter with a gift of $600,000 to a Utah gay rights advocacy organization. Now, I'm interested in this story because it parallels what is happening in Christianity as people are bailing out, so to speak, quitting because the leadership in so many of our religious networks, certainly in much of the Baptist world, which is my heritage, and much of the Catholic world, and much of the Mormon world, the leadership is stuck in social and cultural theological positions of the Middle Ages, and they can't bring themselves to take a leadership role in many of the issues that are facing America. Of course, they're reflecting the attitudes and dispositions of many of their members as well, as many of the rank and file, many of the pew sitters in American religion are resistant to many things, including, I might add, the vaccine, including the teaching of things like evolution in public schools. They are resistant to welcoming gays and lesbians into the church. Many people are abandoning Christianity. I have a story about that a little bit later down the pike here. Let's go to Oklahoma City, a little further east, and talk about Life Church, headquartered in Oklahoma City, led by a minister by the name of Reverend Craig Goschel. He's launched his newest expansion, long considered an industry leader in applying technology and other business tools to church leadership. This church, Life Church, is the first to partner with Microsoft and launch a presence on what's called the alt space, that is virtual reality. This is not the same thing as cyberspace. Different dynamics, different tools, different skills. This Life Church has 36 campuses, traditional campuses, in a dozen states. Their total weekly attendance exceeds 100,000 people. They all gather in different places, but listen to the same preacher. The new virtual reality gathering has added another 200 in its second week of operation. I suspect that will increase exponentially. The pastor tweeted, quote, celebrating those who attended the first two people who decided to follow Jesus. Hashtag, we're just getting started, he tweeted. This is just another groundbreaking way in which churches are taking advantage of technology. I'm sure your church has, just as mine has. We've all had to learn how to work Zoom and to live stream, and now they're launching into virtual reality. All of these offer opportunities and challenges to congregations, but in the little church where I pastor and preach each Sunday morning here in North Carolina, we will have 2 or 3 times as many people online as we do in the sanctuary. This past Sunday, we had about 25 in the sanctuary, another 5 on Zoom, and perhaps as many as 100 watching over those first 2 days of the week. This is the new reality about not only church life, but about our social life in general. And as a matter of fact, just before going on air today, leadership in our little church canceled in-person plans for an in-person Christmas Eve service. The COVID is surging again. You need to be wearing a mask. You need to get vaccinated. You need to be careful. We all need to be. And canceling an in-person Christmas Eve service is the very least we can do. The leadership of our church is coming into the sanctuary to live stream our service. Scripture, musicians, mostly. I don't think there's going to be a sermon, but we'll be telling the story of Jesus. I won't be there. I'll be in Georgia. We're going to move further east to Cleveland, Ohio. Christian Aid Ministries of Berlin, Ohio, just southwest of Cleveland, announced that the last remaining 12 of their lay missionaries seized as hostages in Haiti are now free. This, of course, has been in all the public news media. but there's very little information made public as to whether any ransom money was paid. There's very little information about how the release or the escape happened. The reports are that the 12 staged an overnight escape, running through briar bushes, wrapping their children and carrying them. But they arrived at Port-au-Prince airport in vehicles of the U.S. Embassy and the Haitian National Police. Quote, "We glorify God for answered prayer," end quote, Christian Aid Ministries said, bringing to an end the 2-month ordeal. We've been reporting on this almost each week in the Meetinghouse. Christian Aid Ministries represents the Anabaptist tradition, which of course are the precursors to the Baptist, what is known as the Radical Reformation. It's that part of the Reformation that rejected state sponsorship, state money, state approval. All other Reformation groups, Lutherans, Reformed, Calvinist, the Anglican or the Church of England, what we call the Episcopalians, they all partnered with their local state authorities. But the Radical Reformation, including Mennonites, Anabaptists, eventually the Baptist, rejected state authority, state funding, state support, state presence in order to be free of state power and state control. This is the tradition of these missionaries, very similar to Amish people, plain living. And as a matter of fact, the inspiration for our theme music, Simple Gifts. They live simple lives. They dress in simple ways. They reject entanglement with the state. And they have a long standing, 30 or more years down in Haiti of doing ministry work. They were captured, of course, by one of the gangs down there in one of their schemes to raise money. And at first, they demanded $1 million per person. It remains to be seen whether any money, any ransom was paid. It won't surprise me if this is not turned into a book and a movie, especially if the escape under cover of darkness was as dramatic as the earlier reports seemed to indicate. The group, however, is known for forgiveness, and they've already announced that they have forgiven their captors. Of course, they all escaped free, including the children, and they all are back on United States soil. We'll report on this further as more information is made available to us and to the public. Let's go even further east, up to the Northeast, Hartford, Connecticut. The Hartford Research Institute reports that more than half of the U.S. congregations started a new ministry or expanded an existing one during the COVID pandemic. Quote, "The level of new and intensified social outreach and community ministry undertaken by the nation's churches is monumental," the report summarized. The latest data from the collaborative effort that it leads, called Faith Communities Today, the survey includes data from 8 denominational groups and a random sampling of congregation in other denominations for a total of 38 Christian denominational groups. It was a survey that was conducted just last month, November of 2021. So it's fresh information on what has happened in our churches during the pandemic. There's been an awful lot of commentary and reporting and data on how many churches have had to close down in-person gatherings, on things that we've had to stop doing. This is a wonderful report on things that we started doing. It comes at a good time. Just 2 weeks ago, the tornadoes ravaged a great deal of Kentucky, including very near my hometown in Murray, Kentucky, straight up from Mayfield to Bowling Green to Dawson Springs. I have a report about that next. But in the midst of the pandemic, churches of all kinds are helping. I know our little church here in Hendersonville sent a nice donation to one of the religious groups in Kentucky to help in the rebuilding effort. And our church here has for many, many years had a Sunday meal in which we have fed people who don't have enough to eat. The food insecure, as it's referred to these days. For years, it's been a sit-down inside meal with a hot meal served on a table. During COVID, we had to move it outside, and on some days had to simply hand a bag of food. But now we're making preparations to move it back inside on our church campus and feed people who need it. We have a real faithful community of those who serve the food, not just in our church, but in churches around the state, around the region. We have a very faithful gathering of people who come week by week to eat with us. We thank God for this, and I'm sure they do as well. And finally, my final story, I want to move to my home state, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, to Owensboro, Kentucky, which is the headquarters of the Catholic Diocese of Owensboro. It's also the place where I was a pastor for 6 years. Following a 400-mile road trip on December 15th across his tornado-ravaged Diocese of Owensboro, Bishop William F. Medley, Roman Catholic bishop, said he will not forget the destruction, quote, but what will stay with me are the people that I saw, end quote. We all remember that night of tornadoes that hit Arkansas, Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, as well as Kentucky, broke records as the worst tornado event in both Kentucky history and U.S. history. Of any other U.S. diocese of the Roman Catholic Church hit by the twisters, the Diocese of Owensboro, with 878 parishes, bore the brunt of the disaster, which included Mayfield, Bowling Green, Dawson Springs, and Madisonville, as I mentioned earlier. Homes, businesses, schools, and churches of all denominations suffered great damage. When it happened, I emailed immediately friends of mine from high school who live in Mayfield, Kentucky. I showed a picture of this 2 weeks ago. Mayfield, small county seat town in West Kentucky, full of churches. The downtown was just ravaged. Many of the churches destroyed. They'll have to be torn down. And then the tornadoes stayed on the ground, 200 miles, moving northwest up through Bowling Green, Kentucky, the home of Western Kentucky University, a large, thriving regional city. And faith groups and the Red Cross and the federal and FEMA are all involved, collaborating to bring relief, to clear up the debris, to provide shelter and food to the people who are there. All of it special to me because Owensboro is the hometown of my father. He was born there in 1923 and grew up there, graduated from Davis County High School in 1940 before moving off to Detroit to work in the war effort before he himself was drafted into the United States Army Air Force, learned to be a bombardier. I went back to Owensboro as pastor of Third Baptist Church in 1991, from 1991 to 1997, and was pastor of that famous and influential church. A few years after I left, I think in 2008, that church was hit by a tornado. They were hosting a meeting, an ecumenical meeting of the Kentucky Council of Churches, and a tornado picked up the bell tower and flung it through the roof of the sanctuary. The meeting had moved downstairs just moments earlier, 3 minutes earlier. They had vacated the sanctuary and moved to the basement. The insurance paid $8 million to repair the church, and they refurbished it in a wonderful way. I had the opportunity to preach there this past summer for the 125th anniversary of Third Baptist Church. It has a very colorful history, connected with both Sam Jones, the Methodist evangelist, and J. Frank Norris, Baptist fundamentalist preacher from Fort Worth, Texas. I've written a lot about that, and you can go to our website and read the stories that I've written about Third Baptist Church and about my dad, Tom Moody, including the last legal public hanging in the United States, which happened right there in downtown Owensboro. My dad was 13 years old, hitchhiked into town on an early Friday morning to watch it happen. He was there with 25,000 people and newsmen from all over the country, Chicago, New York, Louisville, of course, Detroit. I've written about that. I've talked to him about it. That's all in Owensboro, Kentucky, just across from Evansville, Indiana, on the Ohio River. That's all the news that we have, brought to you by PerfectoCoffeeInc.com. Order your coffee from PerfectoCoffeeInc.com. I'll be back in just a minute with my commentary entitled A Star Overhead. Yes, it has a little seasonal influence, but it's about what's going on in America today. I'll be back in just a minute with that. Let's take a look at our sponsors, Perfecto Coffee. You are in the Meetinghouse, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'm your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody, coming to you from Hendersonville, North Carolina, from our studios here. Sometimes I broadcast from Kentucky. Sometimes I broadcast from Georgia. And I have broadcast from other places as well, including last year from St. Meinrad Monastery, St. Meinrad in Indiana. But here's my commentary for the week, entitled A Star Overhead. I take it from the lyrics of a song that I'm going to quote in just a minute. But I love that lyric, and I selected it for this commentary, A Star Overhead. Each Sunday morning, I drive down Fifth Avenue on my way to church. My route takes me past First Baptist Church, just as one worship service is ending and another is starting. Parking lots along the way are full of cars, scores of people walking along the sidewalks, crossing the street, many of them couples carrying their Bibles and purses and Sunday school material. I'm very familiar with this scene. It's a large, white Southern Baptist church, less than 1 mile from my own destination on Sunday morning, the small Providence Baptist Church where I preach. Last Sunday, 25 people gathered in our sanctuary, as I reported a little earlier. 5 others joined on Zoom, and perhaps a dozen watching live to our broadcast on Facebook, many other dozen watching later. First Baptist in our town is not a mega church, but just up the road is the main campus of Biltmore Church. It's near Asheville, North Carolina. It is a 7-campus mega church with a branch now in Hendersonville, just 5 miles from the little church I pastor. An attendance of 2,000 each week qualifies any church for the list of Protestant, Pentecostal, and evangelical megachurches maintained by the Hartford Institute of Hartford, Connecticut. Your church may be a megachurch if it has 2,000 in regular attendance. There are more than 1,300 such congregations in the United States. Some of these megachurches have more than 10,000 in attendance, like Life Church of Oklahoma City that I referenced a little earlier. And these are called gigachurches. Recent data released by Pew Research Center demonstrates that the decline in Christian affiliation is almost exclusively from the Protestant wing of the Christian community, from both mainline and evangelical and Pentecostal churches. That is, the Catholics are not losing members in the way the Protestants are. This decline in affiliation and participation in membership is driven by a resistance to the version of Christian faith and practice that dominates these large megachurches. Many of us call it Trumpism. Not that these megachurches would call it that, of course, but they generally embrace the Christian nationalism associated with white supremacy. They describe their religious mission as working feverishly to restore the United States to its destiny as the premier Christian nation in the world. Quote, "We are losing our country," end quote, is a common refrain. One U.S. representative from a Western state said this week, and I quote, "I'm tired of ungodly people running our country. It is time for you and me to take it back," end quote. I witnessed this spirit firsthand at the 2021 annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention. You remember I secured press credentials and went and reported from their meeting in Nashville, Tennessee. But I read about all of this weekly in preparation for my weekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to by going to our website at themeetinghouse.net, and in preparation for this weekly broadcast. Not that this sort of rhetoric would be heard on a typical Sunday morning at any of these large congregations. It's not like they preach about it every Sunday. But family and friends, saints and scholars testify that such convictions are woven into the culture of churches like these. The culture is very Republican in its political orientation and very resistant to racial justice, gay rights, ballot access, and creation care. These, of course, are all dominant planks in the Democrat Party. These churches are all too often the epicenter of the anti-vaccine movement. In fact, many of the churches and their seminaries, as I've reported here in the Meeting House, have gone to court, federal court, and asked the judges to overrule the governors and public health officials who have put in place public health protocols like wearing masks and getting vaccines and not gathering in public spaces. All of these things, resistance to racial justice, gay rights, ballot access, creation care, and public health protocols, makes many people say this: if that's what it means to be a Christian, count me out. That's a refrain that I hear often in public and in private. I mutter it to myself, I'll have to confess, more than I care to admit. I read things that other Christians write. I hear things that other Christian leaders say. I watch the direction in which they lead their people. I hear the rhetoric that dominates their quasi-religious gatherings. And I think to myself, well, if that's what it means to be a Christian, count me out. That's not what I want to be a part of. What is happening is this: white Christianity in the United States is increasingly dominated by this megachurch mentality of right-wing politics and right-wing religion. Collectively, they are pushing out of our family of faith anybody who deviates from this, anybody who feels uncomfortable with it, anybody who can't subscribe to all of this cultural agenda, this cultural war to take back America. Increasingly, the megachurch version of faith has become what it means to be Christian in America. I think about all of this as I drive to church on Sunday, and I think about it at many other times during the week. I think about the minority voice that I raise each Sunday, espousing a gospel that combines personal salvation and social transformation, that embraces both the holiness of mystery and the hard work of justice. I preached last Sunday, as many people did, taking the Magnificat of Mary as my text. Magnificat, of course, is a Latin word. It is the first word of this poem or song that Mary quoted or sang, which we call the Magnificat. You could read that sermon on my website at you can read that sermon or even watch it on the website at providencecongregation.org. At the Sunday dinner, which always follows our morning church, one person introduced me to a choral piece called the Canticle of the Turning. It had been sung just that morning at her church, the Lutheran church here in town. She had attended church there and then joined us Baptists for lunch. Here are some of the lyrics, quote, "My soul cries out with a joyful shout that the God of my heart is great. And my spirit sings of the wondrous things that you bring to the ones who wait. You fixed your sight on your servant's plight, and my weakness you did not spurn. So from west to east shall my name be blessed, could the world be about to turn." Wonderful lyrics. That's just the first verse of this wonderful choral piece that their choir sang. Using this refrain, could the world be about to turn, which is a modern version of what Jesus said, the kingdom of God is at hand. The message is very similar to the text of a hymn sent to me days before by another person, a person in our congregation. As a matter of fact, the associate pastor of our church. I quoted it in my Sunday sermon. I'm going to quote just the first verse here for you right now. For everyone born, a place at the table. For everyone born, clean water and bread. A shelter, a space, a safe place for growing. For everyone born, a star overhead. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy. That's just the first stanza of that wonderful hymn. I think there are 5 or 6 stanzas. We're going to play it here in just a minute for you. These are not the songs heard or sung in the mega churches near and far, but here and there, smaller Christian communities on main streets and side streets, like the little place where I preach, are bearing witness to another way of loving God, following Jesus, and living in the fullness of the Spirit. It's alternative to the kind of religion that's espoused in the mega churches of America. And I want to say that being a part of this network, this alternative network, lifts my spirits as I drive to church each Sunday. Enough to say with all those in churches large and small, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. I'm Dwight A. Moody in the Meetinghouse. That's my commentary for the day. But here is the church choir of First Plymouth Church of Lincoln, Nebraska, singing the anthem that I just quoted, For Everyone Born, a Place at the Table. Let's take a listen. That was the church choir, First Plymouth Church of Lincoln, Nebraska, singing For Everyone Born. You can find that on YouTube, like I did. I love the line from that song that I quoted earlier, a star for everyone born, a star overhead. Isn't that a wonderful idea? Not just for Jesus, but for everyone born, a star to signal the miracle of birth, the wonder of a life, the potential of every person to love God, to follow Jesus, to be full of the Holy Spirit. You're in the meeting house where we have conversation on religion and American life. We often have book reviews, and you can go to our website at themeetinghouse.net. I've got many book reviews. I've got two coming up. I always like it when friends of mine write things. Here are two books that I'm going to be reviewing in the very near future. Curtis Freeman, who teaches at Duke University, wrote a little book called Pilgrim Letters, an introduction to the basic teaching of Jesus Christ. I'm going to read it and review it. And then, of course, another longtime friend of mine, Dr. Terry Ellis, as a matter of fact, was pastor of First Baptist Church Murray when I first met him, has written a book called Reasonably Happy, how the Serenity Prayer can help you stop fighting, accept life, and discover the happiness that God created you for. I'm going to read both of these, and both of these people I hope to have in the meeting house that we can talk about these books. But I want to announce today something. For some months, I've been planning to broadcast my show on Thursday, January the 6th from Washington, D.C. As it turns out, I'm not going to be able to do this for other reasons unrelated to the meeting house. But of course, January 6th was the day of the insurrection. This is, by any stretch of the imagination, the most significant and important thing that happened in our country this year. Why it happened, how it happened, what it means, and what we're going to do about it has been at the forefront of American public life. Even now, the congressional investigation is going on. Some people are cooperating, some are not. Many people are being sentenced to 6 months in jail, or a year, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. Sometimes I think these are awfully short sentences for people who participated in a rebellion, in an insurrection, and did what they did to what is called the People's House, Congress, the United States Congress. But I'm one of many people that think this was a warning shot, this insurrection, that the resentment toward the federal government that bubbled up around the election and overflowed in this insurrection is more powerful today than it was a year ago. And that we are liable to witness many more episodes like this. I'm going to announce today that beginning on the 6th of January, I'm going to focus the meeting house on this theme: God and country, the crusade to take over America. The crusade to take over America. What happened on January the 6th started about the time I was born in 1950. Religious people in the American South and in many other places around the country have resisted most of the changes in American life, beginning with the 1954 decision, Brown versus Board of Education, in which the then dominant practice of segregating Black people and white people in public schools was declared unconstitutional. the federal government, federal judges, and federal troops had to enforce this new interpretation of the American documents, and it met with enormous pushback from the American people in the South, in particular, religious people in the South. One of the things they did was launch alternative schools, Christian schools, they called them, segregation academies, many other people called them. But this effort to integrate American public facilities like schools and restaurants and transportation has not been easy. This was part of the broader civil rights movement, against which, again, religious people, not just in the South, but all over the country, resisted. Yes, many devout Christians and Jews were at the forefront of this movement, led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But a great deal of the religious establishment did not like it. They did not like the federal government coming in and telling them what to do, who to hire, who to rent to, who to go to school with. This was the beginning of a series of very controversial things that have fed a growing and grassroots discontent with federal power in the United States. You remember in the 1960s when Congress passed the civil rights legislation. And then the Supreme Court ruling allowing cross-racial marriage. In many places, I think the case that made it to the Supreme Court was in Virginia, where it was not permitted for blacks to marry whites, a relic of the American slavery culture. And the Supreme Court threw that out. And then in 1973, the great Roe versus Wade, in which the court said that a woman is free, has the freedom in the privacy of her own life and with her own doctor to either carry a baby, a pregnancy to term, or to abort it. Now, up until that time, abortion had not been a big issue in American religious life, and I'd never heard a sermon on abortion in my life, being raised in a Southern Baptist church in the South. But somehow, abortion rose to the top of the moral heap. And racial issues, abortion issues, government issues galvanized what is known as the culture war, led by the Reverend Jerry Falwell, now deceased, and later the Republican leader and president, Ronald Reagan, who famously said, government is not the solution, government is the problem. Well, of course, many people, poor people, Black people, women who were pregnant, had found in the federal government, especially the Supreme Court, an opportunity to participate and to go to school and to have charge of their own bodies and to live where they wanted to live and ride on public transportation. They found in the government a support, but many people, especially many Christian people, found in the federal government a power that intruded in the kind of life they wanted to live. And then, of course, other things came down the pike, especially when the Supreme Court ruled that gay people, gays and lesbians, have the right to marry. Falls under the generalized right to privacy that undergirds much of the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. But all of these rulings enforced by federal power have angered many Christians. And you put on top of that the rise of the teaching of evolution, which many Christians believe is antithetical to the Christian gospel, to the Bible. And you see that for 70 years, this grassroots animosity toward federal power and the expansion of rights and freedoms has created a more open and more diverse society that has threatened the hegemony of white Christian America. Just about a year ago, a little over a year ago, one of my guests in the Meetinghouse was Robert P. Jones, who grew up as a Southern Baptist in Jackson, Mississippi, went to Baptist schools, Baptist seminaries, and then finally a Methodist university in Atlanta, Emory, and got a PhD in sociology. He wrote a book called The End of White Christian America, in which he details the decline of the power and influence of the white Christian churches. This book has been an award-winning book, and I encourage you to read it. I have reviewed it. You can read my review at themeetinghouse.net. You can go back and watch my interview with Dr. Jones. I hope to have him again very soon. As this grassroots animosity toward federal power, much of it carried along by religious rhetoric. The religious rhetoric that says people are taking our country. People are kicking God out of the country. People are stripping God and religion out of the public square, according to a book written about 30 years ago by Richard Newhouse. All of this has fueled a grassroots movement, much of it led by preachers, ministers, and other church leaders, to resist what they call the secularization of America. And they are on a sustained, multi-decade, no-holds-barred campaign, crusade to take back America. Now, it's very unclear about where they want to take it back to, whether they want to undo gay rights, undo abortion rights, undo integration, undo the right to marry who you want to marry, whether they want to strip the teaching of science and evolution out of public schools. Certainly one thing is true. They don't want to go along with public health officials in their campaign to get us all vaccinated and boosted and to wear a mask and to protect all of us from the COVID that is ravaging the world, that has already killed 800,000 Americans. This campaign to take over America is stronger than many people realize. It's more threatening than we want to admit. What happened on January the 6th, 2021 is just a foretaste of what could happen, because all across America, there are religious groups that are arming themselves, creating militias. They collect all of this gathered animosity toward liberalism and toward openness, toward diversity, toward racial justice. And they gather it up into a crusade to take over America, to elect judges and to take over school boards and state legislatures and governorships and the White House, in order to transform America into some kind of theocracy, that is, where religion rules. America has long lived under the separation of church and state. And in that scheme, religion has flourished. Not only Christianity, but Judaism and Islam, and even unbelief has flourished. We live in a country where people are free to believe what they want to believe, where their conscience is not burdened by the control of the state. But this movement, this crusade, which I've called God and Country, the crusade to take over America, is more powerful than many people realize. And I'm going to launch a long-running investigation and reporting on what's going on. This is the most important thing happening in religion in American life today. It's not technology. It's not doctrine. It's not the decline of Christianity or religion. It's not the diversification of religion in America. It's not the rise of Islam. It's this campaign, this crusade to take over America. and run it according to their strict ideas of what it means to be a Christian. Ideas that, as my commentary today fully indicated, differ strongly from my own. I hope you will join me on January the 6th as I launch this reporting from the Meetinghouse, this interpretation of what's happening into America. I'll be publishing more about my plans. I would like to hear from you. If you're listening today, I encourage you to write me, post on the Facebook page, tell me you're listening. Join me in this. This is where we're going to be in the Meetinghouse for the next months, maybe the whole year. And I hope you'll stay with me. I'm Dwight Moody in the Meetinghouse, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'll be back in just a minute to wrap up this broadcast and close out the show. You're in the Meetinghouse with me, your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody, coming to you from Hendersonville, North Carolina today. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and thank you for watching and listening today. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. There's a place at the bottom of the page where you can write me. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter. It goes out about 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, Eastern Standard Time. It's free. It contains much of the material that I use on the show on Thursday afternoon. On the website at themeetinghouse.net, you can read all the commentaries that I've written over the years about Roman Catholicism and Southern Baptist, about John Prine and C.S. Lewis, about my dad, Tom Moody, about my own journey as a minister, as a person, as a scholar, as a broadcaster. This show itself will be up as a podcast within 24 hours. There are many, many podcasts up, some audio, some video. You can join our Circle of 70. I need your support. This year, 2021, we've taken in just shy of $25,000. That's not a lot of money. I don't make any money. This pays our expenses, buys equipment, helps me travel, buy the books that I buy, helps me send coffee, Perfecto coffee, to all of my guests. But you can go to our support page and send a year-end gift and to be a part of our Circle of 70. I'm trying to generate 70 donors. I think we're somewhere between 30 and 35 right now. I selected the number of 70 because I started it last year just as I was turning 70. Actually, that's been a year and a half ago. You can visit the support page and join us. You can send us a check. Thank all of you for listening today, coming to you over rejoice975.com, 97.5 FM, 94.7 FM in Glenn County, Georgia. And also SSC, St. Stephen's Church Live.tv, on several Facebook pages, YouTube pages, and also through the Meetinghouse Facebook page. I want to thank my engineer and good friend Everett Armstrong down in the studios in Brunswick, Georgia, and also the wonderful engineer Alex Mattingly in Lexington, Kentucky, managing all of this from Kentucky. Next week, my guest will be Mark Wingfield, editor, Baptist News Global. Until then, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Go to church, go to the mosque, go to the synagogue, go to the temple, drink some coffee, order some Perfecto coffee. Pray for the soul of America. Be kind to somebody today. I'm Dwight Moody in the Meetinghouse. Have a great day and Merry Christmas.
You have been in the Meeting House with host Dwight A. Moody. Thank you for watching or listening today. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net for more news, reviews, commentaries, and conversation on religion and American